I fucked up. I accidentally revealed my boyfriend's mom's infidelity. Obligatory. This story actually happened about a year ago. I, 18F at the time, was dating a boy named Jacob, 18M at the time. His father, early 60s, was a mechanic, and his mom, mid-50s, was a som. They were a pretty typical white suburban family in the South and had asked Jacob if they could meet me even though we had only been dating for a month. At the dinner, I met his mom, dad, older brother, older sister, and her newborn daughter. The dinner went well and I was chatting about my volunteer work at my college's blood drive, to which his father explains that his doctor told him he was O negative and a universal blood donor. My boyfriend mentions he is also O, but his siblings casually mention they are both AB. I don't think anything of it because my BF had mentioned that his mom was married once before and was widowed. The following conversation went like this: me, oh that's really cool. You're a really rare blood type. If you don't mind me asking, is your mom's blood type A and your dad's B or your dad's A and mom's B? Us, older sister, what do you mean? He's O. Gesturing to my BF's father. Me, oh I know. I was just asking about your bio father, but of course, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. I notice his mom get really pale, and it was in that moment I realized I fucked up. OB, older brother, what do you mean bio father? Me, I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it. Jacob's dad got real quiet and looking at his wife's face. He knew instantly. I look over to Jacob, who I think was starting to put the full picture of what was happening together. Jacob's dad, are you saying they're not my biological kids? Because my wife swore up and down in marriage counseling, by marriage counseling they mean with a pastor, that they were my kids and she would never cheat on me. Yeah. Turns out she never had any kids from her previous marriage. Jacob's mom, I would never cheat on you. Us and Obi are your kids. Jacob's dad, why do you think they're not my kids? I tried to excuse myself because it was very clear the cat was out of the bag, and with a quick Google search from my boyfriend he starts cussing out his mom. She starts to sob and apologizes over and over again. And I am forced to explain 9th grade biology to his father about the fact that the only kids he could have produced were with the blood type O, A or B, but absolutely not AB. Jacob was the only one with the possibility of being his son. Today I fucked up by saving a topless woman from drowning. My family, wife, kids and in-laws, and I had just returned from a pontoon cruise for the evening. It was later than usual, so I sent the wife up on the golf cart with the kids and in-laws to get them some dinner while I covered up the boat. About halfway through covering up the boat, I noticed someone halfway across the cove in the water all on their own, and she appeared to maybe be in distress. She wasn't making progress swimming one way or the other and occasionally going underwater. There were people on the opposite shoreline yelling at her, but I couldn't tell what they were saying. I yell asking if she needs help and she says yes. I call my wife and tell her to come down on the cart. Someone is in the water and needs help. I'm going in. I might need help getting the person out. I put on a life jacket and grab the throw cushion from the boat. I swim out to the person and pass off the throw cushion. She appears out of breath. First thing she says to me is I'm topless. I respond with I'm okay, but are you okay? I also immediately think to myself, 1. My friends are never going to believe this. 2. What is my wife going to think with a topless woman swimming to shore with me? She then says she's running from her boyfriend who is messed up. She also asks if it's shallow enough to touch it. It wasn't going to be. I help her to the dock where my wife meets us. She tells my wife I'm sorry but I don't have a shirt on. Again my wife just asks if she's okay and she tells us the boyfriend's story again. Sure enough, as she gets out of the water she is topless. But she is carrying a white t-shirt that she quickly throws on. She then immediately begins running to shore. At the same time we notice a pontoon cruising towards our dock yelling at us. At first I think this must be her boyfriend chasing her and we are in the middle of some domestic dispute. They quickly get closer and I realize it's 2 sheriff deputies who flagged a pontoon down to carry them across the lake. As they are jumping onto the dock we notice the girl had just jumped into her golf cart and was riding away on it. Apparently she was allegedly involved in a string of burglaries and the boyfriend she was running away from was the cops. I had unknowingly aided her swim across the lake to escape and she used our golf cart as getaway. The cops chased her for a while through the night, tracking her down once more, but she escaped again. We looked all day for the golf cart today with no luck. I notified insurance of the theft around lunch. About an hour ago someone notified us through social media that it was parked behind a house in a neighborhood over. So we recovered the cart and it seems okay. They put more warrants out for the suspect and are still looking for her. TLDR.
Today I effed up by pushing my girlfriend too hard. My girlfriend and I were laying down on our bed and watching funny videos on YouTube. She was laughing hysterically at quite a few, so much so that it caused her to let one rip, fart, more than once. This was obviously not intentional, which made it both hilarious and adorable. After the third time it happened, she said, "I'm really gassy." I took this as an opportunity to quickly press down on her stomach, which then almost immediately triggered an enormous fart. I lost it. It was so funny and I could feel the vibration as the pressure caused her to fart again and again. I couldn't help myself and kept doing it. This is how I effed up. After a few successful attempts I tried for a final push. I wanted to end it on a huge one. It was so funny and she was laughing so much. I pushed down and nothing. So, I pushed again, but this time much harder. Now this is where I should note that she was wearing nothing but one of my t-shirts. Hence she had no underwear on. My girlfriend sharted. She sharted and then had a severe follow-through, all over our bed. She was mortified. It went from pure joy to absolute chaos and horror. She was just staring at me blankly like she had just killed someone. I didn't know what to do as she went quiet, my legs covered in shit. I stared right back, gently held her hands and walked together to the shower without looking back at the bed or down at my legs. We didn't say a word. I cleaned up my legs before leaving her to clean herself up. She made me promise not to go into the bedroom. I adore her completely. She looked so scared when I left her in the shower and wouldn't let me clean up despite my offering to do so.
Men of Reddit, what is something you want women to know? That time you smiled when I caught you looking at me on the subway, that one Friday in April, made everything blank that happened that week at work disappear. Just because we find other women attractive, it doesn't mean we find you any less attractive or would leave you for a stranger that passes by. I'm not an emotionless dude. I think about you all the time. Sometimes the smallest things remind me of you. I'm not always great at expressing it, and sometimes I'm confused by my own thoughts and emotions. But believe me, you're on my mind. If you are interested in a guy, don't assume he'll pick up on you dropping subtle hints. I can't read your mind. Just tell me what you're thinking. I love it when you're happy about something, and you sometimes make those super cute eek sounds. Sometimes it's way hotter if a girl makes the first move. What's your dirty little secret? I once pissed on a tree at a party, and then a minute later I saw my buddy sitting at the tree with a girl, and when they got up, their pants were wet. I've cracked one off in every bathroom of every office I've ever worked. Picked up a box of the street the size of a matchbox, had some heft to it, pocketed it, and walked home. Turns out there were bullets in it, and owning said bullets is illegal in my country, so now I'm trying to figure out a way of disposing of them without getting caught or ending up injuring some poor dump truck worker. Okay, so one time, I was walking around on the beach a few years ago, and I wanted some snacks, but I left my wallet in my house, so me hungry young and dumb thought acting homeless was the best idea to get some cash. Well, 20 mins into me sitting on a curb, some weird guy walks up to me and says, "Hey, you're kinda cute for a homeless guy, I'll give you some money if you do something for me." At that point, I wanted to leave, but my dumb blank stayed and followed him to a dark alleyway. Then he turns to me and says, "How much to watch you, blank?" And I stood there for a few mins just taken back. I said $500 joking, and he pulled out a stack of cash. So I hate to say this, but I got paid for blank in an alley, but the food was worth it. 10 tenths would be homeless again. What is the dumbest thing you've ever done while you were high? I microwaved cheesecake because stoned me found it odd that it was always served cold and not hot like it should be. And on a related note, piping hot cheesecake will take those munchies away real quick. A sober friend put the other high guy's phone in my bag. I found it funny, so I left it there. I completely forgot and took it home with me. Later on an alarm goes, so I go investigate and then find the phone. Tried to tell the guy and called his phone. The phone that was in my hand. This one time I was in front of my TV watching comedians in cars getting coffee, had my bong on the coffee table between me and the TV. I am seeing Jerry Seinfeld driving someone in New York, and suddenly, see a cop car joining their lane behind them. I quietly and slowly took the blank down on the floor so the cops can't see it. Once I was looking at the moon, and I was just noticing the details in it, and I took a step forward to get a closer look like a dumb ass.
What are some common signs that someone grew up with terrible parents? They tell traumatized stories and think they are happy memories. When they think they always cause problems for others, and when they are emotionally and socially closed off, so it's very hard for them to be more sociable, etc. They are always trying to figure out what they did wrong and what they're supposed to be doing and how, while editing their own thoughts and feeling vaguely bad. They're completely unwilling to open up and share anything because in their experience it will always be used against them. Doesn't talk about their interests because parents have never showed interest, belittled them. When I told my professor in graduate school that I wasn't going home for Christmas, he said, "Oh yeah, I mean, your parents can't be the best company. I've seen you apologize for being too polite." Like, yeah. They don't understand simple gestures of kindness. Took my husband a long time to understand that my parents liked giving little gifts to people and doing things for them, that they weren't trying to insult him or us or make us feel incompetent. They were just showing affection. What parenting trend you strongly disagree with? Recording your children when you punish them. That's private, not for the public. Anything posted on the internet lasts forever. And children are cruel. Wait until at school, see. They will carry that their entire lives. Overscheduling activities. When I was teaching, I remember my kindergartners telling me they had no time to play because every day consisted of non-stop structured sports, dance and such. Overprotection. Kids need to slowly, safely learn to manage risk, and that means that they must take risks. Not letting kids learn this hurts them as adults, and preparing kids for lives as adults is really what parenting is all about. Oversharing stuff about your kids on social media. A picture of little Johnny's poop in the potty is not cute, it's disgusting. You wouldn't post a picture of your own feces in the toilet, doesn't make any difference coming from a 2-year-old. Making your child terrified to fail. I gave up on so many things because I repeatedly got called fucking idiot if I wasn't instantly an expert. What is socially accepted when you are beautiful but not accepted when you are ugly? Literally just existing and talking to people. There's a guy at work named Sean. Sean is unfortunate looking. He's a redhead, he's balding, yet his sides and back are pretty long. He doesn't cut his nose hairs, he's constantly red-pink, pot-bellied. And yeah, he kind of lingers around your desk and talks a bit too much. Problem is, we all kind of do that. You know. Overstaying your cubicle visit or whatever. Everyone at work thinks he's creepy. They all think he'll shoot up the place or maybe will eventually be banned from entering a school zone. TBH, Sean is a sweet, nice dude. He's your nerdy, 40-year-old virgin type of dude. He's got a lot of friends, from what I can tell on Facebook, and practically zero work friends. He plays on different softball and bowling teams, goes out to bars with his friends, and from what I can tell, seems perfectly normal. I talk to him every so often and he's a really nice guy. I visited his desk and he said I was the first person to visit him. He started here maybe 6 months ago. It's very unfortunate for him that people think of him this way. I know for a fact that if he was skinnier, had hair, and wasn't ugly, that people wouldn't think he's creepy at all. Serious, people who went missing, what happened? When I was 4 I got lost in a city and was rescued by what my dad thought was a gang. We had dinner in Chinatown with another family, 5 kids and all crossing the street after dinner. We were holding hands in a big chain. My older sibling let go. When the light changed and everyone crossed, I stayed on the sidewalk. I was looking through a window into a barber shop where some huge guy was having his head shaved. Can still picture the scene. When I finally looked around, everyone was gone. I started to cry. A group of teenagers approached and asked if I was lost. I said yes. A tall kid hoisted me into his shoulders and started down the block. Other kids split up and went in different directions. We rounded a corner and I saw my dad. He turned white and ran toward us. The kid lowered me to the ground. A few other kids were there. They stood around awkwardly while the tall kid explained what happened to my dad. My dad, not a demonstrative guy, flung himself at the kid and hugged him. My mom appeared and picked me up. Years later my dad told me he saw the same group of kids hanging around when he first parked in the city that evening and was suspicious that they were a gang. He was embarrassed and tried to be less judgmental after that. Wish I could thank those guys. This was a long time ago. Serious, what's the worst butterfly effect that you set off, whether on purpose or an accident? Me spotting a weird light outside my window led to me becoming homeless a couple years later. Saw a weird light outside our house one night, told mom. It turned out to be my dad calling his mistress. Divorce, mom gets sole custody. Some time passes. My mom is ready to move on and reconnects with an old boyfriend. They decide to go on a trip together. He and my mom end up in a car accident. She dies. I'm just about to turn 18, so I can't go into foster care, and my extended family takes her shit and ditches me, homeless. It's really weird to think of it this way. I do wonder what would have happened to me, or to her, if something in there had gone differently. I sent my wife's lover's chat log and hotel receipts to his mother. Thanks Facebook, they live 2,000 miles from us, and after doing some digging into him, when I found out, I realized that his mother was supporting him and his wife and 3 children. He's 44 years old. His mom kicked him out, but let his wife and kids stay. His wife divorced him. I divorced my wife, now he's living in his car. I'm not even upset about it. F my wife, F your life. Redditors who grew up with strict parents, what was the most absurd rule you had to live by? I once got grounded because I did the dishes without having to be reminded. My mom said that I was trying to manipulate her and that I must have only done it because I was trying to get something out of her. In reality, all I really wanted out of her was to stop yelling at me about how I never do the dishes without having to be reminded. I was not allowed to use the money cheat on Sims growing up because that's not how the real world works. I used the cheat once and couldn't explain where all the money I had came from, so I was grounded and had Sims taken away. Nobody in my house was allowed to get the mail except my dad. Doesn't matter what time he got home, leave the mail in the mailbox. He would also personally open all the mail no matter the recipient. He would always know if anyone touched it. After I turned 9 years old, I wasn't allowed to watch cartoons anymore. I hated my dad for it. I wasn't allowed to leave my room. I could go to the bathroom or kitchen, but I better have a reason to be there. People who have been incorrectly accused of cheating. What was your partner's proof? She has cheated so many times that she immediately recognized my behavior. She found a necklace in my bed and I didn't know how it got there. Turned out to be her necklace that she had lost and didn't recognize in the dark. She heard a woman in the room laughing through the phone when she called me to accuse me of being out with another woman. Turns out there are other people in the world, and when you're out in public you just may encounter them. Apparently the online support group for my father's brain tumor was a chat room for casual hookups. I was deep into an online game and my wife came to me with a bra that definitely wasn't hers. She stood by the door and loudly said, "Whose are these?" I took what she said as an innocent question, rather than an investigation. I quickly looked over and said, "Fuck if I know," and went back to my game. She quickly realized that if I had cheated, and she found proof, I would have had a deer in headlights look for a second. It was her sister's bra that somehow go into our laundry. We laugh about it to this day. She knew that if I drove exactly the speed limit and hit every light that it would take me 12 minutes to get home after work. The one time I showed up in 14 minutes was all the proof she needed. Bro laid mad pipe in 2 minutes. Where are you banned from and what did you do to earn it? Got banned from the mall when I was younger because I wore an inappropriate shirt that I bought in the mall. I'm banned from The Sims Online. I would befriend people with large and expensive properties. Eventually they would give me roommate permissions. I'd wait until they logged off, I'd then sell all their items, delete all the structures, fill the lot with water, build a bridge to a center island filled with llama-shaped bushes, and post signs saying, "Welcome to Llamaland," all over the property. I don't know how many times I did this before I was permanently banned from the game. I have no regrets. I was banned from r/military for asking about how many soldiers were cheated on. I am former military and I was cheated on, so I wanted to get a legitimate sample statistically. What made you ghost a friend? Every conversation was about them and their lives. They rarely asked or were interested in what I had going on. The selfishness was just too much after a while. When I realized a lot of the things that made her laugh were at my expense, she thrived off of humiliating me. When I realized she was maybe my best friend, but I was not hers. In fact, I was only useful to her. I told her not to tell anyone, so she told everyone. Every time when there is a girl involved, this dude turns into the cringiest being there is, try-harding so much to get laid. In a group chat, when 2 girls were talking about what to wear for their girls' night out, he started bringing up panties, bras and whatnot. I left that group, started a new one with everyone from the old group except him. Too much insult humor, really fucked my esteem. Teachers of Reddit, what are you? The parent is just as bad as the student stories. Teaching adjacent. I used to be an educational facilitator at a science center. During the school year I would be the liaison for school trips. During the summer, I would run the summer camps. Parents used to like to plunk their kids in science camp because it is educational. We had a pile of hands-on programming. I have to say, it was pretty fun. Fun unless your kid aggressively hates science and you are forcing them to be there. Enter Jason. Jason was a shit on day 1. We welcomed them to camp by making liquid nitrogen ice cream. Jason didn't give a shit. He refused to eat stupid nerd ice cream. Through the day his attitude got worse. He refused to participate, called the other kids nerds and losers. He was an all-around pain in the ass. At pickup, I pulled his mother aside and said, "I don't think Jason really wants to be here. We can arrange for a refund or see if we can transfer him to another program he will find more to his liking." His mother replied, "It's your job to make him want to be here. Clearly you suck at it." Great. Day 2. Jason shows up with an even bigger chip on his shoulder. The day's activity was engineering. Fort building. Every kid loves a good fort, except Jason. Jason picked up one of the plastic tubes and cracked a kid across the back of the leg with it. As I run over to tend to his victim, Jason cracks me across the side of the head with the tube with all his might, breaking my glasses and giving me a decent bruise across the side of the face. It takes two of us to disarm Jason and separate him from the group. We pull him into the admin office and call his parents to come now. He is no longer welcome. His mother shows up a good 3 hours later, absolutely livid, not about Jason's behavior. Not in the least. There was no apology or understanding. Instead, as we ejected her son from camp, she turned to us and said, "I hope you all get cancer." What made you realize someone you knew was actually completely effed in the head? Went out hunting. While we were taking a break, he pointed his rifle at my head, paused, and pulled the trigger. It wasn't loaded. I left and never went anywhere with him again. When they told our friend group of 15 years they had brain cancer and would be dead in 3 months. Went on going away vacation with everyone. Cried a million tears. Made funeral plans. Had therapy sessions about it. They are still alive. Never had cancer. Turns out they were just worried they were going to jail for embezzling money. Shaking my head. Still not sure how that was going to play out well. When he told me a 19-year-old dating an 11-year-old was okay. My ex, a nurse, told me that one day she would kill me by injecting me with insulin under my toenail as I slept. Which would probably be the perfect way to kill someone thinking about it, because if you died with too much insulin in your blood they would chalk it up to your pancreas stopped working and thinking nothing more of it. Joke's on her. She died of a fentanyl odd. People who have had friends stab you in the back. What is the story? Made plans to go see a movie with my friends for my 16th birthday and planned it weeks in advance. Everybody bailed the day before, but I decided to still go see the movie. Ran into my whole group of friends leaving the movie theater while buying popcorn. Best friend stopped talking to me after my dad died. Took the whole friend group with him. Apparently I was too emotional. I was 13. Having my entire friend group walk away from me when I was in such a shitty place stuck with me forever. We, my husband and I, had a friend that we helped get back on his feet, paid off some tickets he had, got his license reinstated, hooked him up with a solid connection for a reasonable, well-running car to replace his beater, and gave him a place to live and a job, automotive repair. He decided it was a better choice to tell all our customers we were overcharging them. Spoiler. We weren't, and he'd do the jobs cheaper if they'd bring it to him at his house. This was a short time after he moved out of our house, after never repaying anything he owed us, not that we'd asked. Broke my heart. What's the stupidest thing someone has argued with you about? I watched a couple break up over whether or not a chicken could be a pet. They got into this extremely heated argument, which led to them hitting each other. Eventually both of them turned to me and asked for my opinion. I said, why couldn't a chicken be a pet? I've seen videos of people having chickens as pets. The girl got pissed off at my answer and had to go have a cigarette to calm down. After that, she refused to talk to me because I sided with him. Volatile. I work at student loans, and if you have a child under 18 and your household income is under a certain amount, you're eligible to receive a grant to help with childcare. Woman comes in and I tell her with her income, she can receive said grant. She says she doesn't want it. I tell her it's a grant that she'll never have to pay back, unlike her tuition fee and maintenance loan. She doesn't want it as her child is 13 and can handle herself. I say I understand, but explain it is offered to everybody in the threshold, so it's basically free money to help people with children. She doesn't want it. In the end, I asked her if I offered her £2,000 which she would never have to pay back if she could prove her child is dependent on her, would she take it? She said yes, obviously. I say that's what the childcare grant is. She doesn't want it. What is the laziest thing you've ever done? Used to have one of those clap on, clap off lights in my room. I hated clapping, so I just made an audio recording of me clapping and mapped it to one of the programmable keys on my keyboard. Shot 10 Nerf darts at my light switch, from bed, missed all of them and slept with the lights on. I was in a class called OJT, on the job training, in high school. Every day the last 25% of school was dedicated to me being able to leave class to go to work. We were given grades by our employers which would then turn into grades for the class. As a high school senior, I convinced the teacher that oversaw this program that because I had my own corporation that I used to sell stuff on eBay, I should be able to be my own boss. She agreed. I failed that class because I didn't bother to fill out the paperwork to give myself a grade. Not me, but a buddy of mine was laying in bed one morning, picked his nose and had nowhere to put it back in his nose. Fell asleep wearing full makeup, woke up, wore the same makeup the next day. Every night I piss in bottle soda cans instead of walking 10 feet to the bathroom. Reddit, what are some of your unpopular opinions? Even if schools taught you how to do taxes or other life skills, not many of you would pay attention. It should be illegal for companies to advertise that a phone has a certain amount of space only for half of it to be occupied by the OS. If children are required by law to attend school, it is the job of the school to feed them, for free. Cigarettes should be a Class 1 drug. They don't have any accepted medical use and have a high potential for abuse. When someone asks you what do you do for a living, mostly it is to calculate the level of respect they need to give you. People who lie on their resume, get hired, and do a good job aren't bad. In fact, they're proof that degrees mean very little. I would have no problem with my husband taking a second wife. I'd also have no problem being the second wife. I love it when my microwaved food is cold in the middle. We need to acknowledge ugly people exist, rather than saying things like all people are beautiful. Ex-cons of Reddit. What's the most terrifying thing you saw inside a prison? Not prison but courthouse holding cells. Was in for a drunken fight myself, as was pretty much all of the 8 guys I was sharing that cell with. All of us were worn out, hungover or shaking for a fix except this one guy who was acting happy because he was up first and in his words going to be the first to get a smoke, which he was happy about. Being locked up in those cells, it's not rare for people to chat a bit since we had all been in solitary police station holding cells before, usually what are you in for type small talk. Well, this happy guy didn't know what he had done but knew he couldn't remember the last couple of days, so assumed it was drunken behavior of some sort. He was the first to see his lawyer and came back quiet as a sheet, not talking and just staring at the wall until one of the guys got him to talk. Turned out he had got blind drunk with added Valium, found on him, got in a fight and lost, gone home and come back with a kitchen knife and a kettle full of sugar water, stabbed a random guy and thrown the kettle into the bar, scalding multiple people, plus the guy he stabbed was in hospital in critical condition and he was up on multiple counts of assault with intent to injure, serious bodily harm, possession of a deadly weapon, possession of a controlled substance and attempted murder. He was not going to be first out for a smoke and was looking at a long prison sentence. Went from cock of the walk to hollow in all of 20 minutes. I'd seen a lot of shit, but I've never seen someone get the look of having lost their entire life like that. Women of Reddit. What's the hardest thing to explain to men? The feeling of your uterus shedding its skin inside of you. No, we cannot hold our period like pee. That not all women discuss you behind your back with their friends and put you down or share your secrets. If I love you, I'm your biggest fan and want to keep the personal stuff between us only. If you shared personal things and confided to me, it stays with me. If your ex did that doesn't mean I would, you obviously mean more to me. If I'm crying, it's more likely because I am frustrated and angry than because I am sad. Why I don't want to take someone else's name. My name's mine, I like it and I want to keep it. Sometimes we just want to emote and share our feelings. We don't necessarily need a solution, we just need to have someone empathize with us to make us feel more validated. What would be a funny thing to say to a surgeon before anesthesia kicks in 5 seconds later? The last time I tried to say something funny right before surgery, they were about to put me out and I said, "Go easy on me, doc. It's my first time." I gave a little chuckle and so did the doctor. He then picked up a scalpel and said, "Don't worry, it's my first time too." And then I promptly blacked out. Right before I went under to have surgery on my septum, I was about to start counting backwards before they put the mask on. Does anyone need anything while I'm out? The last thing I remember was in a room full of people hysterically laughing. They had a thing checking my heart and it fell off and it flatlined. I told them, "God damn it, you killed me." Lawyers of Reddit. What was the best gotcha moment you ever experienced? Told this story a few years back, but everything old is new again. My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case, he was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic, very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things looked grim. Then my brother notices the deposition transcript, done by social workers under oath, contains a question at the end from one of the kids: "Did I hit my marks?" My brother had previously tried to make it as an actor in Hollywood right out of high school, failing miserably, and decided to go into law. An altogether different form of acting. He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas the wife's personal checking account during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach, and panicked coach quickly coughs up DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids. Hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20+ years of practice, and dad got sole custody of the kids. Therapists of Reddit. What was the moment you realized your client couldn't be helped? Not a therapist, but rather a client, and I ended up giving a therapist an existential crisis once. He had to drop me after that. It was pretty out of the blue, and he made it very clear and apparent to me that at some point during our sessions, something was triggered in him that unleashed a whole load of his own trauma. It began to bleed through what you would expect of the typical boundaries a therapist would have between clients, and he mentioned that even after our sessions, he couldn't get it out of his head. He politely advised me that he wouldn't be able to see me anymore because he had to seek a therapist himself before he could start seeing clients again. Fortunately, I was able to continue seeing a different therapist that he recommended to me, and I'm doing fine now. But I still joke about the time I won therapy. What's the best forgot to turn off the mic story during virtual learning? During my English class, this one girl forgot to mute herself while my teacher was talking. She almost deafened all of us on the Zoom call answering her mother's questions. Her mother, from a distance, "What class are you in?" Her, yelling, "English." Her mother, "Oh, the hot teacher?" Her, "Yeah, that guy." Now, even I'll admit my teacher is fairly attractive, but it does take it to another level when you get your own mother involved. Thankfully, our teacher is a chill guy and thought the whole thing was just kind of funny, and kind of just gave a general reminder to the class to keep mics muted. She didn't say anything for the rest of the class. When I was doing an online algebra camp, the teacher forgot to turn off his mic while we were supposed to be doing some problems. He said, "I effing hate math." Reddit, what is your most cringe story about someone who has a crush on you? When I was in high school, I was in Spanish class with a girl who had a crush on me. I loved this class because I had it with a few friends and the teacher was cool and I made a lot of jokes. I was unpopular until my junior year, so this was all new to me. So, one day, I went to class and was joking around and Spanishing it all up like I typically did. Then this girl who I had talked to but wasn't really friends with had a note passed to me. She sat across the room, so like a dozen people were involved in passing this note to me. I opened the folded paper and read, "Are you going to see the new Star Wars movie?" I had seen the old ones but wasn't really interested in them that much. I've rewatched them since then and love them. But at this point I didn't like the movies, so I said, "No," and gave her a look like she was stupid for even asking me such a ridiculous question. Everyone looked at her and apparently knew what was going on. She kinda slumped down in her chair and said, "Never mind," really sheepishly. It wasn't until after college that I figured out that she was trying to ask me out on a date and I rejected her in front of the entire class. I feel horrible now. I totally would have gone with her. She was pretty cool. Ladies, you have to spoon feed us when you're interested. When did you realize you were attractive? When I was giving flirting advice to a friend in college and she was like, "No offense, but this is terrible advice and it only works for you because you're pretty," and I didn't believe her at first. But then I actually went out of my way to be really boring to a guy that approached me at a bar. One-word answers, no follow-up questions, generally just bad manners, and he still asked for my number and texted the next day to say that meeting me was a lot of fun. It actually really effed with my head for a long time. I was a late bloomer, so I really thought that the guys who were hitting on me were doing that because I was cool, fun, or smart. Then I realized that it was entirely possible that they didn't like or even care about me. Maybe they just liked the way I looked. It made meeting and trusting new people challenging for a number of years. Now, at 30, I have a better grasp on the consequences of my looks. I'm better at gauging the interest of strangers as shallow or sincere. And, I know this sounds bad, I understand how to play up being attractive when it's convenient or beneficial, and downplay my looks when it's important to fly under the radar. My granddad used to come to my room at night wearing a mask. Now I know why. Granddad's nighttime visits started when I was 13 years old. This was a few years ago now, but it only stopped fairly recently. And I still remember the first time it happened. It was the middle of the school holidays, and my mom was ill. Mom being ill wasn't something that bothered me too much at the time. It was a pretty common occurrence, something I was even used to by then. Every month it would happen the same way. Dad would come to my room and tell me Mom wasn't feeling so good, and that she'd have to go away for a while until she felt better. Then he'd drive off with her in his car, and collect her a few days later. I never knew where she went. Never knew what was wrong with her either. Sometimes she'd come home with scratches up her arms, but apart from that I never saw any other symptoms. When Dad went off to collect her, I'd wait by the door for them to come back. I'd wait for her to reappear and scoop me up into her arms. "I missed you, Cubby," she'd always say, planting kisses over my face. "I love you so much. My name's James, but as long as I can remember Mom's called me Cubby. It's her nickname for me." Every month, the same routine, Mom getting ill, going away for a bit, then coming back as if nothing was wrong. But the summer I turned 13, things changed. The routine changed. Because that was the first time I started going to stay at Granddad's. My granddad's a large man with a white beard and a shaved head. He's from Sheffield originally, and he still has this deep, gruff northern accent, communicates mainly in grunts, lives on his own on the edge of the New Forest, in an old ramshackle cottage. We hardly ever saw him when I was little, and when we did I always dreaded the visits. He scared me. I wasn't scared of him by the time I was 13, though. Or at least that's what I told myself. No, The reason I protested when Dad told me I'd be staying with Granddad this time while Mom got better was because I didn't want to leave the house. I wanted to stay near my friends. The kids I knew in the village would be out climbing trees and going on bike rides. If I was cooped up in Granddad's cottage, I'd be missing out. Dad was having none of it, though. He wouldn't give me a reason why I had to go, or respond to my protests. Just told me it would be good for me to spend time with Granddad. Then he bundled me into the car and we left. 45 minutes later I was standing on the doorstep of Granddad's cottage, raising my hand to knock. Dad had already driven off. I was trying to tell myself I wasn't a little kid anymore, and there was nothing to be scared of, but as the cottage door creaked open and Granddad's large shadow fell over me, I couldn't stop my heart from beating a little harder in chest. Granddad's cottage was old. The ceilings were low and the furniture was minimal. The carpets were moth-eaten, ancient things that seemed to kick up tiny clouds of dust whenever you put a foot on them. The bathroom had black mold rising up the wallpaper. The paper itself was damp and flaking, and had peeled away to the stone in some areas. Entering the room felt like stepping into a cave. My bedroom wasn't much better. It was right at the back of the house, and it had only 3 pieces of furniture, an oak chest of drawers, a dilapidated wardrobe, and a single bed in the corner. I remember my heart sinking the minute I set eyes on it. Oddly, even though I can picture Granddad's house clearly enough, I don't remember much about how I spent my days there. Especially during that first visit. I think we mainly kept out of each other's way. Granddad would be in the lounge watching TV or reading, and I'd be in my room on my phone, making the most of the 1 bar of 4G I could find in the cottage. I can't remember if we spoke to each other much, or what we said if we did. Mostly it's a blur. What I do remember are the nights. The first night in particular. I told Granddad I was tired, and that I was going to head to bed early. He grunted something in response. Then I spent a bit of time in my room on Snap and YT, the videos taking painfully long to load, before heading to sleep. I woke sometime in the night. The cottage was silent around me. I could hear the leaves of the birch tree rustling in the wind in the back garden, but that was all. Moonlight spilled through a gap in the curtains. I leaned over to check my phone and saw that the time was a little after 2 a.m. For some reason I felt wide awake. My heart was beating hard in my chest and a film of sweat coated my forehead. As if I'd woken suddenly from a nightmare, but if I had, I couldn't remember it. I tried to relax, tried to lie back and let sleep wash over me again, but in Granddad's cottage, relaxing wasn't an easy thing to do. At first I'd only been able to hear the tree outside the window, but as I lay there on the pillow, staring into the darkness, I began to hear other noises, too. The soft creak of a floorboard, faint taps, a distant rattling, which I assumed had to be pipes in the wall, and other sounds, as well. Sounds I found it harder to place. At one point I heard something that sounded like a faint snuffling noise, coming from the back garden, some kind of animal, but when I sat up in bed and strained my ears, all I could hear was the wind. Get a effing grip, I told myself. You're 13 years old, not a little kid anymore. It was easier said than done, but I managed it eventually. I don't know how long I lay in the dark for, but after a while tiredness finally got the better of me. My mind began to settle. I felt myself slowly drifting off, only to jerk suddenly awake again when I heard a noise outside my room. A soft, deliberate creak. Loud and clear in the darkness. I turned over in bed, trying not to make a sound. My heart hammered in my chest. I pulled the covers down from my face slightly, positioning myself so I could peek over them. So I could see the bedroom door, and as I stared at it, feeling like I was 5 years old again, I saw the handle begin to turn. I squinted my eyes shut. I don't know what thought was going through my mind, but right then I reverted to an age-old tactic, pretending to be asleep. Playing dead. I could still see through a crack in my eyelids, but now the room was blurry as well as dark. I lay as still as possible, trying to keep my breathing normal. For a few seconds, nothing happened. There were no more sounds, and then, just as I was beginning to think I might have imagined it after all, the door swung inwards. Granddad stood in the frame. I couldn't make out his face, but I recognized his towering bulk. He was standing completely still, filling the doorway top to bottom. Breathing heavily in the silence. He's just checking on you, I told myself. He's come to check that you're okay, that's all. But even as the thought went through my head, I saw something that made my blood turn cold. I saw something that made me suck in a sharp breath and tense my entire body below the covers. The shape of Granddad's head was wrong. It was all wrong. Even in the blurry shadows, the wrongness was unmistakable. His silhouette bulged out in strange places, bulking out around the lower half of his face in a way I couldn't understand. I opened my eyes another fraction of an inch, unable to help myself, and what I saw did nothing to quiet the fierce whirling in my chest. Granddad was wearing a mask, a black mask. It covered the lower half of his face, allowing space at the top for his eyes to peer over at me. The mask covered his mouth and nose, with multiple straps on each side stretching around his cheeks to the back of his head. It looked like one of those pollution masks people sometimes wore in big cities. I snapped my eyes fully shut, forced myself to breathe in, then out, then in again, nice and slow. I kept my ears strained for the sound of Granddad's feet on my bedroom floor, but it never came. After a while later I heard the soft squeak of the door shutting, and his footsteps receding down the hall. We never spoke about him coming into my room. I never mentioned it to Granddad, and he never said anything about it to me. I never told anyone else, either. I thought about telling Mom or Dad after that first visit, but in the end I kept quiet. Partly because I was so happy to be home again, I think, but mostly because the memory had taken on a strange quality by that point. It was like an old, half-forgotten nightmare. I could still picture it, but the fear I'd felt at the time had faded. It was as though the whole thing had happened to someone else. The feeling didn't last, though. Next month Mom got ill again and I was packed back off to Granddad's cottage. I protested hard at that time, but Dad still wouldn't bend. He just told me to stop being selfish and to give my mom some space so she could get better. Wouldn't look at me as he said it. And once again, when I stayed at Granddad's cottage, he came to my room, stood in the shadows of the doorway, the same black mask on his face. He never touched me or anything. I don't want you to think that. This isn't that kind of story. He simply stood on the threshold of my room, on the edge of the moonlight, staring in at me. Then after a while, he'd leave again. The ritual happened every time I visited. It's been happening each month for the past 3 years. And it was only yesterday that I finally learned the truth. Only yesterday when all the pieces clicked into place at last. My boyfriend for 3 years died. I'm devastated. My boyfriend committed suicide. I'm miserable. I don't know what to do. He was the love of my life. He was the person who would support me, love me, cuddle me, kiss me, F me, so genuinely and full of love. I miss him so much. He had an argument with his abusive mother 3 days ago, and he told me about it through our messages. I calmed him down. I told him to get some rest. He didn't answer after that. He didn't send me a good morning text, which was unusual because he'd do it every day for 3 years without fail. I had to text his younger sister, who only replied a few hours later with devastating news. He was found in his room, hanged on the ceiling, a note by the chair that he kicked down. I loved him so much. I loved how he would invite me to his online games, loved how he would like to be the little spoon every time we cuddled, loved how he would eat yogurt using its cap, loved how he would send me pictures of his cats when they were doing something funny. I miss him. I miss him so much it's physically painful. Please spend time with your loved ones. You'll never know how much time is left to be with them. My wife poops in the shower. My wife poops in the shower and stomps it down the drain. Not a joke. She recently told me this and I've been living with it for weeks now. She even broke the news to me while laughing about it. You know what a waffle stomp is? She asked me as she laughed and laughed so hard she started crying. I feel disgusted and betrayed. I can't even look at her over breakfast anymore before I head off to work, and while at work all I can do is wonder to myself, is she doing it right now? Apparently this has been going on for years. Says she uses all the scented candles she obsessively buys online to mask the smell. I work 12-15-hour days, so plenty of time to cover her shit stink. A few times we've had to snake the drain due to a clog. Now I know why. I'm not sure I can live this life anymore. What was the most gruesome thing you saw at your school? My high school had a pool, so every year we did a swimming unit for PE. This meant changing into swim trunks at the start of the class, changing back at the end. So after class, we're all changing back into our street clothes. All of us except for Pat. Pat is holding his tidy whities in his hand, staring at huge, chunky skid marks, and someone notices him doing it, and they get everyone else's attention. In seconds it's turned into a locker room full of teenagers pointing and laughing, and Pat didn't know what to do about it. He looked around at us, threw the underwear in the garbage, and declared, "Somebody shit my pants." He spent the next 3 years being known as the guy who shit his pants and tried to blame someone else for it. But senior year, days before graduation, a friend of mine was reminiscing about his high school hijinks, and he told me, "Oh, yeah, one time when everyone was swimming, I went into the locker room and just took a dump in someone's underwear and put it back." He didn't even know whose underwear it was, didn't even care, just thought it was funny. What was your worst nightmare come true moment? Shitting myself in front of my wife and all her friends and family, and instead of excusing myself, doubling down and pretending like I didn't, I walked around the house at that gathering with the most potent stench of human shit radiating from my ass. Everyone knew, it was pretty obvious. No one knew how to handle the situation and tell me to go clean up, so I just continued to walk around and sit down on furniture next to people until eventually, some of it slid down my leg onto the hardwood floor. At least 6 people saw it and the rest didn't know yet, not until the dog came over and started eating it. They couldn't get the dog to stop. They were yelling and pulling him off, but he was a large dog. At this point, the night was ruined for everyone. Not a single piece of food was touched after that. I was asked by my mother and father-in-law to please excuse myself and take care of my little situation. By the time I got cleaned up, all the guests had left without saying goodbye. My wife was livid. Apparently I ruined her birthday or something. I've been sleeping on the basement couch for a couple weeks now and picking at the leftovers that no one touched from that day ever since. What are the origins of your username? When I played WoW, way back in the day, I had a raid leader named Sean. Now, Sean was a really nice guy and our crew was pretty tight internet friends. Sean had speech impediment and would regularly say the phrase "guys, it's time to get serious," stumbling over his R's. Unknown to the guild at the time, Sean had terminal cancer. He eventually stopped showing up to raid nights, and after he died, in accordance to wishes, his father came into vent one night to tell everyone. I named every character I made after that some variation of the word Suius. That way no matter what group I was with they would audibly say something like, "Hey, Suius, pick up the ads," and it became a way that I honored my friend, because in a way he never really left. I used to steal all the time and I regret it so much. So over a year ago when I was 13, me and my friend decided to steal. Not because we were broke, just because it was fun and exciting. So I got addicted after a while and I started going to malls without any money with friends and go home with bags full of things we wanted, and I was so good at it at that point. My mom got suspicious because I had so many new clothes without spending any money, but I just continued. I would even steal in the store with my mom and siblings as a secret, and that was so messed up. I never thought about the consequences for some reason. If I would have gotten caught, none of them would have seen me the same way as before or trusted me for some MF candy bars that I could afford. And one day me and my friends got busted, and ever since that I have never done it. It's so embarrassing how much we did it and how many security officers I used to lie to, and also how many cameras I must be on. I wounded my neighbor's eye and I don't know if I did the right thing. So last Saturday I got an airsoft rifle. I'll practice the hobby casually but still throw a chunk of cash every time and again. And I've been messing around with my scope as it came offset. While I was sitting on my balcony, roofed over, I was just scanning the end block. I saw my neighbor, whom I fucking despise and for the next week, had just been spying on him, and I realized 4 things. 1. He smokes on the balcony and just chucks his buds out. 2. He doesn't like his cat. 3. His demeanor towards his wife/girlfriend is always shock. 4. He doesn't know anyone is watching him, so he kicks his cat often. So I'll have been practicing marksmanship by hitting things on his balcony: glasses, clothes, cig packs. So yesterday I was watching him and I saw him dangling his cat over his balcony. He's 8th floor, I'm 10th floor, opposite building, and so I had to watch as he held his cat by the legs and shook him. This either part I feel bad about. I set up stuff to block vision to me, clothes etc., and then started shooting him. Now I use a fairly strong rifle, to be exact the GSG 4410 spring rifle. So after about 7 shots I hit a shot finally and hit him in the eye. From what I know he has a patch on his eye and no one saw me. So should I come forward and apologize or should I wuss out? When I was in 3rd grade I stole 2 Matchbox cars from the local grocery store. I was with my mother on a shopping trip, and I opened 2 individual packages of Matchbox cars and snuck them into my pockets when no one was looking. At the time, we lived on an old farmhouse property, about 2 acres with light forest. I waited until I had to go to bed to take them out of my pockets because I was so scared of getting caught. I always played on the edges of the property, which were enclosed by an approximately 4-tall chain-link fence. I even had a fort I built from sticks. The day after I played with the cars for the first time in the dark, I was so terrified of the FBI, lol, coming to investigate me, I hid the cars in my backpack and went to school. I was on edge the whole day, thinking the cops were going to walk in the classroom at any minute, or I would get called to the principal's office and they would be waiting for me. After I walked home, I went to the edge of the property to my fort and threw both of the cars into the neighboring field and prayed no one would find them. I never got caught, and I even eventually told my parents, and was scolded appropriately, but to this day I still feel more guilty about that than almost anything else. The properties were later developed into condos, but as far as I know, those little Matchbox cars are still there. Maybe centuries or millennia from now, An archaeologist will find them and wonder. I like to think I've made my contribution to history. How I almost got kidnapped in front of my dad. I lived in Indonesia, and when I was like 6 or 7, was going to an printing service store with my dad. My dad gave me his phone and told me to stay still, but me being the adult kid that I am, I rebelled and went outside of the store instead. Then all of a sudden this 5 feet 5 inches dude came out of nowhere. He's a bit chubby, he has like an really classical straight goth hair. He got really muddy ripped jeans, and black AC/a t-shirt and a leather jacket on. It sounds very cartoony but he really does look like this. He also got a toy watch on his left hand and brown shoes. From what remembered, one interesting detail is he got a thin beard and also a mustache that reminds me of a not so good historical figure's mustache. He started walking behind me raising his hands like he was about to grab me. I was dumb and didn't even try to run despite seeing him about to grab me. My dad came out of the store on the right time that he was about to grab me. My dad fake smiled and started waving at him. He waved back and started walking in the fastest pace. I went into the car with my dad and inside my dad told me to be careful next time. I didn't know about abductors or traffickers as a child or at the very least thought they were a myth or simply fake. Despite this happening a long time ago I still remembered the event clear as day. If this were to happen today that guy wouldn't even able to lift me info. I don't know how tall he was exactly but he was shorter than my dad and my dad is really short, 5'6", though his height was probably considered average in this country. Indonesia has the shortest average height more than any other country. Redditors, what started off as a small lie but then snowballed into this is my life now. My freshman year of college I was walking around campus when a very friendly looking girl waved at me. I'm awkward, so of course I waved back. The next week, the same thing. This began the weirdest saga of my life. For the next 2 years, we greeted each other as old friends every time we came across the other. She knew my name, somehow. I never could figure hers out and it was way too late to ask. I just pretended I knew who she was and why she knew me. Finally, I joined the honors program and entered my classes for my thesis. Who should be in this class but Mystery Girl? I was horrified. I wouldn't be able to pass it off anymore. First day of class we are all sitting there chatting and she greets me by name, again. I had finally learned her name from attendance, thank God. Someone asks, finally, oh, so do you two know each other? Where'd you meet? Silence. I stare at her, she stares at me. Finally she breaks down wailing. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, we've just been waving at each other for 2 years and it was too late to ask. She's standing in my wedding next spring as one of my bridesmaids and very best friends. What's your sad love story? When we were both school children we met, spent all of our free time together and became inseparable. We first kissed at age 9 and were boyfriend-girlfriend in that cute school-age way. We stayed that way until she moved away age 15. It killed us both but she had no choice. Her dad was in the military and got posted abroad. We stayed in touch, writing letters, telling each other how much we loved each other and missed each other, every week without fail. Then she wrote me the best letter I've ever had. She was coming back home. She was 18 and decided to come back to study at the university local to me. She was so happy. I was so happy. We truly were soulmates. She told me she wanted us to be married as soon as possible. The minute she landed back on UK soil, she called me from the airport. This was a long time before mobiles or the internet. Just a quick call to say she was back and that she loved me and would be seeing me in 4 hours' time. Those 4 hours were the longest of my life, and then that stretched into 6 hours, 10, 24, a few days, a week. I was utterly frantic. No news. Then I saw her family moving into the same house they'd left all those years ago. I ran up to her older sister, begging her to tell me what was going on. She'd been killed in a car crash on the motorway coming back to me. Her family, in their grief and pain, never called me to tell me. Gone forever. All I have now is photos, letters and memories. That was over 30 years ago. I'm still not over her. I've loved, even been married but no one else ever came close. She was the one. I still dream of her, not every night, not even every week but at least once a month. My Rachel. I've kept a secret from my parents for the past 23 months, and I'm going to tell them tomorrow. I have a fiancé that my parents would certainly not approve of, and it's been tearing me apart for the last year and a half. I met my fiancé 2.5 years ago, and tomorrow will be our 2-year anniversary together. We're planning on getting married this August. I couldn't be happier with her. She's funny, smart, loyal, she loves me to death, and I feel it every day, and on top of all of that, the best bonus any guy can ask for, she's absolutely amazing in bed. The problem? My parents and I are Chinese immigrants. My mom and dad have a strong dislike for black people. My fiancé is black, and she's an immigrant herself from Ethiopia. For the past 2 years, my parents have been trying to introduce me to various Chinese women, and obviously, since I've brushed off all of their friends' daughters, they're starting to even suspect maybe I'm gay and don't like women. They've spent tens of thousands of dollars to put me through school. They paid for my living expense during my 5 years of college, not to mention raising me into an adult. Now that I have a good job, an amazing girlfriend, and ready to move on in life, I fear tomorrow will be the end of our family. There is no way I'm going to give up on my fiancée. I can't see myself growing old with anyone else besides her. The pool. When I was 8 years old and my brother was 6, we went to a friend of my mother's house. I ended up befriending the daughter of my mother's friend. We played board games, video games, and generally had a great time. My mother then told me we had to go because my brother got sick and threw up on the floor. I was extremely angry with him. So, in order to get back at him, I lead him outside while everyone else was getting ready to leave. I then lead him to the pool in their backyard, and pushed him in. I wasn't trying to hurt him, I just wanted to get back at him for spoiling my fun. I thought he would just reach for the edge of the pool and climb out, so I just went back inside. A few minutes later I heard screaming. My mother's friend had gotten my brother out of the pool and performed CPR on him while my mother freaked out. But it was too late, he had drowned. I regret that day ever since then, and probably will for the rest of my life. I wish I wasn't so childish. Maybe then my brother would still be alive and my mother wouldn't have PTSD and bipolar disorder. It's all my fault.
Throwaway time. What's your secret that could literally ruin your life if it came out? I'm a guy in my late 20s who was taken into care aged 7. Everyone around me already knows that I was brought up by foster families because I had a shit early childhood. I deliberately keep it vague and say stuff like I'd rather not go into it so that people will just assume I was abused in some way and they'll stop asking about it. The truth is that for the first 7 years of my life, I was brought up as a girl by my psycho birth mother who really wanted a daughter and didn't let the snag of giving birth to a boy stop her from trying to raise one. She was a pretty successful professional in a legal field, not entirely sure what, and had me via anonymous sperm donor from a fertility clinic. She found out I was a boy at a late ultrasound and then moved across the country. Gave birth to me at home and continued to move about until I was 5 or so. It was just the two of us all my life. We had contact with other people, of course, but they rarely got very close. I had lots of friends, but was always supervised. I found out way after that my mother's strong puritanical Christianity was a lie she used to explain why she was so strict about me being private and never letting anyone see me get changed or anything. I just accepted all of this as fact, having never been told anything different. I was sent to a religious school for girls and had a really great childhood. I was a bit of a tomboy, and played with Lego and toy animals, rather than dolls and stuff, but that's not unusual and no one ever questioned I was a girl, even me. He knew about men and women, but had never really seen much of naked people. My mother never ever spoke to me about it, but I kinda had the impression that when I grew up and got boobs and stuff, my dick would kinda fall off or something and I would be a woman. And other kids would keep their dicks and they'd be men. I dunno, to be honest, I never really thought about it. Anyway, I carried on with my happy girlhood, and had a bunch of friends and everything was great until I was 7 and a teacher accidentally spilled a cup of hot coffee over me at school. The liquid soaked through my clothes and was scalding me, so the staff immediately stripped me out of my dress and underwear to get the hot coffee away from my skin. And then they found out. Throwaway time. What's your secret that could literally ruin your life if it came out? The cops were called and I got taken to speak with who I guess would be social services. They asked me a bunch of questions about life at home and stuff. Meanwhile, my mother was taken in for questioning too. She refused to acknowledge me as male and insisted I was her daughter. Because she was, delusional and stuff, I wasn't allowed to go back home but got put with a foster family and went through loads of therapy and the worst part was that literally overnight, I lost everything. My mother, my home, all my toys, all my clothes. I moved school, so lost all my friends. They cut all my hair off and told me I wasn't a girl anymore. It was really traumatic. The first foster home wasn't that great. They had 3 boys already, and going from a sheltered religious only child upbringing to a rough and tumble testosterone filled environment was really difficult. They tried to force me to be masculine, and I was just too confused about what they wanted. Anything girly was reprimanded, and I felt so lost and alone because nothing I did was right. I tried to commit suicide when I was 11 and again at 13 because I didn't feel I fitted in anywhere. After the second attempt, they moved me to a different foster family who were awesome. I consider them to be my parents. They actually stood up for me. The first thing was that they let me grow my hair. From when I got taken into care, they buzzed my hair short, and I hated it. They always had to hold me down and do it forcibly while I was crying and fighting. My new parents flatly refused to do it and said that loads of boys had long hair. They also let me quit karate and football and take up swimming and jazz dance. Since I'd been in care, no one had ever stood up for my right to choose what activities to do, or how to dress before. It was a mozzie. In the end, I came out of it with a pretty healthy gender identity. I'm a guy, but not the most butch guy ever, but I'm fine with that. I went through school and got my degree and have a pretty good job and an amazing,